this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful central Illinois. And today our question comes to us from TulipTree. And TulipTree writes to ask how one can tell if one is doing the first degree exercises correctly. And TulipTree asks this because they're coming to them very easily. Now, for people who are not familiar with our first degree lessons, they involve a series of psychic exercises for developing psychic ability and magical ability, which go hand in hand. And they work very heavily with the chakras, very heavily with visualization, and definitely work to build energy within the person. How can you tell if you're doing them correctly? Well, ultimately, I would say you should be feeling them. You should be able to see an effect from them, at least in terms of how you feel physically. And you'll notice this particularly when you come to the point in the lessons where you're working with things like the pearl, or the silver ball, or the golden ball. And those you should be able to feel a difference pretty much immediately. Many of the earlier lessons deal with very tiny steps to get started. The lessons were written for a person who has no background. So the early exercises are very simple. And yet, if you've never encountered them, they're not so simple at all. Now, TulipTree says that they are encountering these as something that they're mastering very quickly and able to do pretty much for the asking. And that is what one would expect from someone who is familiar with working with energy. And TulipTree, I would assume, has either studied energy earlier in this life or in a previous life and has already built up these initial steps. So what I would say is keep working with the exercises, and as you get to the more complex ones and start working with things like the pearl or the silver ball, what you'll want to judge by is how you feel when you do them. You should be able to feel the energy at that point. And the other thing, of course, is to judge by the outcome. And everything in magic and psychic working, you really should judge by its outcome. You should always have that little grain of salt in your mind. You should always have that little bit of skepticism that really resides on how it's working for you. If it's not working for you, you're not doing it correctly, and should look for something either to enhance it or do it differently. But if it is working for you, well, then it's working for you. And again, with the lessons, I would say that as you come to the more complex ones, you should be able to literally feel it energetically. So I hope that answers your question and gives you some food for thought, and until next time, may you blessed be.